researchers' perspectives on Greater Manchester session. And in the afternoon, we've got a session with Transport for Greater Manchester staff, including the lead on the cycling and walking programme, where they'll be reflecting on the challenges of walking and cycling in Greater Manchester and the programme they're running. As you may be familiar from last year, we're running the panels as a discussion. You'll have had a chance to view the presentations of the panelists on our YouTube playlist, and hopefully that's inspired some questions and things you want to raise in this discussion, and we'll have an opportunity to do that after we hear from the panelists. A few housekeeping things. Here's the programme in front of me, in front of us. You can see we've got 4 panel sessions today and then 4 panels tomorrow, and online socials, which will be on Zoom, and we'll be doing a kind of a group breakout type thing. I hope it's fun. We did it last year. It's a nice way to meet people and talk informally. What I would recommend in terms of Zoom is that people turn their cameras off, and you have the option for gallery view, which should let you see just the panel on the screen once we stop the screen share. And you'll also see somewhere on your machine, there'll be an option to hide non-video participants, which will avoid having like lots of blank boxes with names on. And you should then see a neat view of just the panel, hopefully. So that's my welcome, really, and I hope you enjoy the 2 days. There's lots to discuss and reflect upon. I'm going to hand over to the panelists shortly, and as you'll see, we're recording this session. And yeah, we'll get going. And so what I'd like to do first is just ask the panelists to just introduce, this is quick fire introductions. We'll come to a bit more substance shortly, but just quick fire introductions, name, institution, and the theme of your research, please. And we're going down the list as on the website. So we're starting with Sien.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sien Benoit. I'm a PhD student at Ghent University in Belgium, at the Department of Geography and the Department of Movement and Sport Sciences. And my research is about perception of cycling safety for adolescents in Flanders, and that's the northern region of Belgium.
Fantastic, thank you. And keeping going down the list, Simon.
Hi everybody, nice to see you this morning. I'm Simon Cook, a human geographer at Birmingham City University in the UK. Most of my work has been looking at various forms of active practices, running previously and now starting to look at cycling, and specifically post-collision cycling practices. So what happens sort of after accidents and collisions to people cycling.
Thank you. And next is Till.
Yes. Hi everybody, Till Kuglin is my name. I am a human geographer by training, but did my PhD at the technical faculty or faculty for engineering at Lund University, where I did my PhD on cycling in Copenhagen and Stockholm, and have been involved in several research projects concerning cycling, and recently put out a book with Peter Cox, Cycling Infrastructure. It's a policy press book, or Bristol University Press. Yeah, so I'm doing research on cycling planning, basically everything connected to space, since I'm a geographer, and on power relations and how cycling is basically marginalized in public space. So that's basically my focus.
Thank you, Till. And Romana?
Hi, everyone. I'm Romana. I'm currently working as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Innsbruck. Actually, my main research focus is on public transport, but we did a research on emergence of cycling in Dhaka, Bangladesh as a commuting mode in 2015. And today I'm going to discuss about that. So what we try to understand the general attitudes towards cycling and how popularity of a single Facebook group popularized this cycling commuting mode, and how it's going on further.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, Johannes.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me to this panel. Yeah, my name is Johannes Schubert. I'm working at the Kempten University of Applied Science, which is in this south of Germany. And my research topics are environmental and technical sociology, with a strong focus on sustainability issues such as energy transition or more sustainable mobility patterns, but also over tourism. And our study is about analyzing the infrastructural, but also the social preconditions for bicycle commuting in the Allgäu area where our university is located. Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. So that's great. Really wide-ranging panel. We've got kind of, I think it's fair to say, from watching the videos, we've got kind of perspectives on space and also safety. I think that's a fairly sort of a theme that seems to run through, of even if it's not directly focused on safety, it's how safe and welcome do people feel in the space that's there for cycling, or not there for cycling for that matter. So we're going to go around again and just do this time kind of some key points in the research. I would say to everyone, please send your questions into the chat. Don't feel you have to wait, just kind of send them in as you think of them. We welcome kind of thoughts and perspectives as well. If you're submitting a question, please start it with a Q if possible, then I can just, as I'm looking down, I can see what the questions are. And feel free to direct your questions to an individual panelist or to everyone. So we'll start again with Xian. If I just a few key points, kind of key finding, what were the key messages from your video presentation?
Okay, so my research is now focused on adolescents in Flanders, because adolescents they use bicycle a lot as the most used transport mode to go to school. And I'm investigating how adolescents' perception on different environmental factors is related to their perception of cycling safety. And therefore we developed a web platform. It's called the Bike Barometer. And they use it in their classes of geography to draw their routes from home to school, and then they can assess it on cycling safety. And they provide reasons why they give a certain score and so on. So I analyzed that data, and the main conclusions that we found that their largest or the strongest relation with perceived cycling safety are for them how they perceive traffic volume, safety of cycling infrastructure. They also find it very important, space to cycle or to wait at intersections and sight on traffic. Those are the most important things that came out. And so my next steps will be to zoom to objective factors like maximum speed along intersections and roads, or the type of cycling safety and how it's related to their safety feeling. And tomorrow there's a new big data collection starting where we will focus on Ghent and not on the whole of Flanders, so that we can zoom more into specific intersections and roads, and see how people perceive cycling safety instead of waiting until accidents happen and only making action after that. So that's the idea of my research.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, it looked like a very useful tool, and it's really interesting to look at adolescent and school pupils and their perceptions as well. So moving on, we'll hear from Simon next.
Yeah, thank you. My research is probably a slightly different stage to some of the others here. It's very much a beginning of a project. It's a pilot project, so looking into post-collision cycling practices, and I'm only at the stage of sort of doing some quite early data analysis on it. And really, I'm interested in focusing on that question of what happens after accidents to people's cycling, to try and understand sort of the life cycle almost of people's cycling practices, whether they get disrupted, whether they continue and sustain, or whether they might fall apart or even change somehow. And there's, from what I've found, there's not much literature looking at that question of what happens next. A lot of cycling accident research is this very, very useful sort of objective analyses of factors that help contribute to it, and things that could be minimized, which is all wonderful. But that question of what happens next seems to be not as commonly investigated. And equally, if you've seen the video, you'll know this was a project sort of inspired or catalyzed by my own accident, and sort of trying to reflect on that. So there's also a sense of trying to explore the lived experience of these accidents as well, and the aftermaths, to try and really re-embody some of those experiences. So the work I've done so far is some narrative interviews with 7 other cyclists in the UK who have been involved in collisions, some who have returned to cycling, some who are still in the process of or have decided not to, as well as sort of some more auto-narrative reflection on my own journey, which is looking at, say, the experiences of the accident and collisions itself, the health, the legal aftermath, as well as the sort of experiences of trying to get back to cycling. And there's loads and loads there I want to try and explore in the project further. But what I presented in the video was some initial understandings of the changes people make to their practice in trying to get back. So using a social practices approach to explore the changes to the materials, the meanings, and the sort of competencies people have or need to develop in trying to get back to the bike. I think I'll leave it there. Thank
you. Yeah, I could see it was a very personal, presentation and personal experience, and I can see that it's really interesting that kind of your attitude towards cycling space might change, after a bad experience like that. So moving around the screen, Till.
Yes, my idea of my presentation and my research in this sense is more theoretical, but what I feel is that there's a lot of research connecting or concerning traffic safety in general, also traffic safety when it comes to cycling. And there's a lot of research about power relations in urban spaces and stuff like that. But those two perspectives have basically never been connected. And so I think in order to understand what might be needed to transform urban space into more sustainable space, I think we need to understand these power structures in connection with traffic safety. So what I did is I drawn Zygmunt Baumann's notion of space wars, and a bit of Foucault, a bit of Bourdieu, and Luke's, who wrote a book on a radical view on power, where he sees that there are different perspectives or different dimensions of power. And I try to combine that with traffic safety issues and cycling. And what you can see is that the person or the transport mode who has more physical power has also more power over space, because that has been shown in traffic safety research. For example, if a car drives very fast towards a zebra crossing, people stop and do not go over, even though the car might stop. So this is, of course, something that is important also for cycling. And in that sense, speed is extremely important, and we need to change speed. And in order to change that, we need to change planning, urban design that can be then connected to power relations. Infrastructure planning is extremely important here, and infrastructure often leads to high speed in traffic, which is bad for traffic safety, especially for cycling. I mean, if you get hit by a car driving 50 kilometers per hour, the risk of you being killed lies, I think, around 90%. So this is extremely high risk. And then we have like these traffic or speed limits in cities. Not anymore everywhere, but we have that 50 kilometers per hour, which nobody knows where it comes from, but it gives extremely more power to motorized traffic than to cycling. So what I want to offer in my presentation is a broader perspective on traffic safety and introduce classical theories on power to traffic safety, because I think this is extremely important. And in that sense, then it comes with different planning perspectives, different designs. Often design is very bad for cycling because it's focusing on the car. And I think, and I finished my presentation with a quote of Lefebvre, because we do want to change our cities. We do want more cycling. We do want more sustainable cities. And what Lefebvre is saying when he writes about the right to the city, he says, the right to the city is like a cry and a demand. The right to the city cannot be conceived as a simple visiting right or a right to return to traditional cities. It can only be formulated as a transformed and renewed right to urban life. And I think this is what is extremely important when it comes to these issues. And I think I leave it at there.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I mean, I think there's some really important concepts there, aren't there, about who has the power over space and what that means for people using that space, which is really important for this discussion. So thank you. So moving on to Romana, please.
So my research is actually based on cycling in Global South, so it's rather a different perspective. And I can also say that it's also from my personal experience, like Simon. So when I grew up, I was used to cycling to go to school, to college, but that was in a different part of Bangladesh. So the situation is not similar to other parts of Bangladesh, especially in Dhaka, where Dhaka is really known for its infamous traffic congestion, and it's one of the fastest growing megacities in the world. But when I traveled back in 2015 to Bangladesh, I saw that one Facebook group called BD Cyclists, so BD is the abbreviation of Bangladesh. They are very popular, and actually they are promoting cycling to young students and professionals, and they are arranging group rides every Friday, and somehow they are also promoting commuting to work. So I felt really interested, and then I met personally with them, and I talked with them about their disappointments, their expectation, and also their motivation, why they're doing that and why they want to cycle. They say that they want to save time because cycling really saves the time. They took the route around the neighborhood, and they actually reach faster to their workplaces rather than taking a car, because you're waiting for hours and hours in the congestion. So then this idea of surveying came up, and then we surveyed through various Facebook groups. And in the meantime, they have also influenced other Facebook groups, and it was created not only in Dhaka, but in many other parts of the Bangladesh. And then we did the survey, and in 2016, actually, they won a Guinness World Record. They break the record of the longest cycling lines in Bangladesh. So that was a huge achievement. And this popularity of a single Facebook group actually influenced many others to continue cycling. And they have not only influenced other Facebook group members, they've also influenced their colleagues, their friends. So our perspective was to understand how this can influence more and more cyclists on the road, and what are the barriers and what are the motivation, and how this can also influence policymakers, because still now there is no policy implication in Dhaka's city planning strategy. They didn't involve active modes in their strategy. It's more towards car oriented. So we want to see what type of facilities can actually improve the current cycling infrastructure. And it was from the cyclist perspective. So they said what they want to have in future. So yeah, that's it, I think.
Muted, that's a bad error for the chair. Thank you, Romana. It's a really interesting presentation, and I was struck by the gender imbalance that you mentioned. I think it was like 1% female that responded to the survey or something, but you also gave some hope that might be changing, I think.
Yeah, I think so, and hope so. And I've also seen that it has changed, because it was back in 2015, but now I think in the 6 years it has changed. They also have particular Facebook groups only for female cyclists. So I can see this is emerging, and probably it will improve in future if the infrastructure is developed properly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Thank you for that. And so there's some questions coming in. We'll hear from Johannes first, but keep the questions coming. Please put a cue at the start if possible, just so I know what's kind of general observations and which are questions. But first, we'll hear from Johannes.
Thanks. So our departure point of our study is a little bit different from yours. So it might sound funny to you, but cycling is a rather new topic in the Allgäu region. So the Allgäu is very popular with tourists, and they like to cycle in the Allgäu, but it's not an issue for commuting. So we have very long and cold winters here with bad light conditions when commuting. The streets may be covered in snow during winter times, and cycle paths are often not freed from snow, but rather serve as a snow dump, so to say. There is a topography of rolling hills with some steep climbs, and our settlement structures are rather dispersed. So it's a rather rural area with some middle centers of about 40,000 to 70,000 inhabitants. So the preconditions for cycling are, we might say, some harsh conditions. Yeah, and the historically grown infrastructure is designed to fit the needs of cars and car drivers. And there's also a kind of old-fashioned mindset that private mobility by car is number one pattern of mobility. And against that background, we wanted to learn more about fostering or impeding factors for bicycle commuting from the perspective of cyclists who already go to work by bike. So we conducted a small survey, online survey, what was answered by about 700 people, and there is a self-selection bias within this survey. So it was mostly answered by really enthusiastic cyclists, but nevertheless, I think we can draw conclusion for this specific subgroup of the whole population. Yeah, and I guess there are two basic findings, or three. Looking at the physical infrastructure, most cyclists want a dedicated road infrastructure for cyclists. So we have some bike lanes, but they pop up and then they end in nowhere. So we have to go on the sidewalk or end on the street. It's rather erratic. And on the other hand, we have other traffic. So how to say, car drivers behave rather reckless or thoughtless with regard to cyclists. Yeah, and this is I guess it's about what Till said about power over space, and it's a real issue here too. At the same time, if you look at the infrastructure at the workplace, it's kind of old-fashioned too. So there's not a single company in the region which has a seal of quality-friendly, cycling-friendly employer. There's no charging infrastructure for e-bikes or parking spaces with a roof. We have only very little companies with changing rooms or shower opportunities. So what our study showed that there's a huge potential for commuting by bicycle, but there are some infrastructural sorry, I'm looking for the right word. We can't tap this potential, right? Because there are so many impeding factors with regard to physical infrastructure or old-fashioned mindset on the side of policymakers or employers. Yeah, so it's a very harsh environment for cyclists and for cycling-related innovations. Yeah. So
yeah. Thank you, Johannes. Yeah, I watched your video and I was thinking, wow, this is really nice cycling infrastructure. But then you made the point, actually, you know, it's not nice all the time and it doesn't necessarily connect up. And there's obviously some challenges there. So thanks everyone for doing the overviews. We've got some questions coming in, and for everyone else, please do keep the questions coming in. The first question is from John Parkin. It's aimed at Sien, but I think this is relevant for everyone. So let's all think about how this applies to us. So the question for you in particular, Sien, is to talk about how is the Highway Authority using the data and what plans do you have for using this in a wider sense? And then do you think it could be used outside Flanders? So I guess the question then for everyone else is, could they see a role for that kind of tool in the areas that you're working? So do you want to start, Sian, and then maybe others can have a think about how it might apply to their areas?
Yeah, well, there is a possibility for teachers who give this these lessons with the bike barometer in their classes. They can integrate a third lesson where they look at what policy makers are doing, what the local authorities are doing, and what may be better or not. But we see that this implementation of that third lesson is rather limited. However, we work together with another organization who work with adolescents, and they had really the interaction with local authorities integrated. So it was a longer project. So in 3 towns, there have been really towns who were really interested in what adolescents find about cycling and cycling safety in their town. They adjusted their mobility plans based on their reaction. So there is the connection. And to use it outside Flanders, for now it's a platform for Flanders. You cannot use it outside of it. But we plan to do that, and we applied for funding to make it more wider spread in Europe. And there are already a couple of cities in Europe interested. In the Netherlands, we have Helmond, Strasbourg, Logroño, Barcelona, but we did not yet get the funding, so that's a work in progress. But we hope that in the future, indeed, we can expand it and go wider than Flanders only.
So I was trying to avoid background noise. Fantastic, yeah, and I hope you do get more interest in it. So would anyone else like to comment on whether how valuable this might be to their area? I guess there's 2 aspects. One is the kind of mapping aspect, and the other is sort of working with school pupils to find their perspectives on cycling.
I think it's really interesting, this platform, because it's also interactive. So the children can engage themselves with the cycling routes. And you have also incorporated cyclist and non-cyclist perspective, which I think it's really interesting, because non-cyclists always perceive that the route is much more dangerous than the cyclist, because the frequency actually have an effect on that. And I think children, they have the capacity to change the environment. I think in our childhood, the type of behavior that we are engaged with, later in our life, we carry those with us. So if we can maybe if the children learn from the beginning about cycling safety, and this is a sustainable transport mode, maybe later in their adulthood, they will continue to cycle. I think that's a very important lesson, and incorporating that it's really fantastic. And I've also checked that website, actually. I'm really interested in that, to also incorporate some kind of research here in Innsbruck.
Thank you, Romana. Would anyone else like to comment on this? If not, we've got plenty of questions, but if you have any thoughts, please share them.
I just like to say I thought it was brilliant. I love the tool. I think recognizing where that practice expertise that the children have, like they know this better than anyone else, but translating that into sort of policy discussions being missed, I thought was brilliant, and what a wonderful way to get them engaged with it, especially whilst teaching them some GIS skills. I mean, it's brilliant stuff. I think it's really important, as I think Ian has also put in the chat just now, like we so often don't think about children cycling enough, and including them enough in research and in that policy. And I think if you can design so children feel safe cycling, then that's going to just be beneficial for everyone as well. So I think this could be really, really powerful.
Brilliant. Well, unless anyone else has a point, then we'll move on. And I should have said before, by the way, we would like to ask people to read their questions out, and I forgot that with that previous one. So the next one I'm going to come to is from Peter Cox to Simon about social practices. Peter, would you like to to read that out yourself, or shall I just relay it?
That's all right. I'm here.
Okay, brilliant. Right, would you like to? Now you're here.
It was, and it's something because I've been working with Shove's ideas around social practices, and I'm getting. I think you're absolutely right to identify those, but I wonder whether it's actually you're talking about performances in an individual term rather than social practices, and whether we might need, as we keep applying it to cycling, whether we might need to collectively make a distinction between social practices and individual performances, which are still constructed in the same way. And I wondered whether that would kind of help, because Shove's thing is that you've got the big practice network of stuff which recruits participants. It's not the aggregate of what we do, and whether that will make a difference. I know you've got a very small sample, but it could kind of maybe actually that I don't know, there seems to be a point that might open up a new way of thinking about it.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think you're totally right. I think I slipped a bit there in my terminology. You are right. I'm looking very much at those individual performances of practices and sort of the changes they're making. Whether or not there's enough, especially if I get onto a bigger project, enough to identify sort of a specific social practice around cycling after collisions, if there's enough sort of identifiable structures or elements that make that perhaps a unique practice, I think is probably another point that I could open up by trying to separate out these individual performances from that social practice. And for a lot of people, what they were trying to get back to was the social practice as they sort of knew it before. So they want to, rejoin that wider collective practice. So yeah, really helpful point. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Well, would anyone else like to comment on the social practice theory angle? Is that something you've been looking into in your research? If not, that's fine. We'll move on. So let's go to another question. This one's for you, Till, and it's from Daniel Valenti from Uppsala. Daniel, would you like to read it out? Are you there?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Thank you all for your presentations. My question to Till, you close on Lefebvre and the right to the city, and you present a really intriguing framework, bringing literature on urban development, urban transport power, and traffic safety together. And now maybe the question is a bit outside of the scope of your paper now, but any idea, based on your framework, how a right to the city could be reclaimed or claimed?
Yeah, that's. I read the question before. It's a tricky question, but I think what we need is more insights into planning culture, because what we see, or what I have seen in my previous research, is that planners they do stuff what they have always been doing, and they follow like guidelines and stuff like that, and they're kind of like stuck in this planning culture, which quite often is based on car traffic. And I think in order to change that, we need to raise awareness of planners, but even more important, of politicians. And I think a big problem, as far as I know, is that there are certain politicians, not of course the environmental parties, they are all for it, but if you go to the right-wing parties, they are so stuck in the 1950s and 60s, and they can't really change, and they are so afraid of doing change. Also the social democrats and stuff like that, they are so afraid of change because they're afraid of losing votes. And I think we need to get out and convince politicians much more, because in the end it's a political question. I mean, the planners can do so much, and we as researchers can only do so much, and citizens can only do so much. But in order to really reclaim that right, we need to change the political view, and maybe even change the whole system. I mean, we can't really reclaim the city and reclaim the right of the city without radically transforming the city and transforming the planning system. And there was a project at Lund University, which a colleague of me has led, where she looked into mobility projects around Sweden. I think she took a look at 35 different projects introduced by different municipalities in Sweden. None of that had a radical transformative point of view. So the projects are often more like, we do a bit of this, we do a bit of that, and hope that more people will bike. But I mean, if you want to radically change it, that's not enough. I mean, we need to take away parking spaces. We need to reallocate urban space to cycling, to walking. But nobody does that actually, because they are afraid of, oh man, there's so many people driving the car. If we do that, they all get angry, and we will not get the votes. So I think this is like one of the biggest problems. And how to change that, I think, is to go out and talk to politicians, basically, which is kind of hard. I mean, I've been invited to some political meetings where I've talked and given speeches to politicians, and then they say, yeah, oh, that's really interesting, and then nothing changes, because I think it's not enough. But I think we need to change the political agenda radically, and without doing that, I think there's little hope for change, actually. And we see that in research. We have a proposal lying in our desks at my department called the Shared Speed City, where we want to research on how it would be if the speed limit would be on the speed of the cyclists. Everybody is allowed to drive not faster than 20 kilometers per hour, because that would change the system radically. I mean, it would be much more safe. It would be much less attractive to drive in the city, which would reopen more space for cycling and stuff like that. And I think we applied for that project 3 or 4 times at different agencies funding. Nobody wants to fund that project, and I wonder why. Maybe because they are afraid of getting the car industry angry. I don't know, but I think this is like one of the biggest problems, actually.
Thank you, Till. Yeah, does this issue? Sorry, I'm getting a bit of echo here. Sorry. Does this issue resonate for others here?
I can talk on this. I think you're right. I think there's a difference here with the idea of operational, the processes that say an authority that deals with, versus operational with complicit political interference. So in other words, we never question road resurfacing. It just happens. You don't get public consultations. You don't get politicians railing against it. But if you looked at, say, you set the framework that said that, as they have done in the UK with LTM 120s, basically sat there and said that if a road is 30 miles per hour, it must have protected cycle lanes. Yeah, and that became an operational issue, and there was no questioning of the fact that, hey, we're doing a resurfacing of a road. It's a 30-mile-an-hour road. We'll be installing cycle tracks, because that's a given part of that process. Then that's the problem we have here more than anything else. And the only way I think we'll achieve this is not actually at a local level. It's almost at a national level, in terms of say requiring a duty for councils to produce, say, a network management plan, and within it, the network management plan defines the role of each road. And if it's, say, a residential road, then through traffic isn't allowed on that residential road. End of. But that becomes an operational issue with no political interference. There may be a consultation process, but it doesn't stop the act of not making that a through road. And the same way with councils, and this is the problem. If road resurfacing is something that's done without any question, why are cycle tracks something that becomes this big political issue, or creating low traffic neighborhoods is a big political issue? It shouldn't be. It is just an operational thing to decide at a almost at a national level.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam, for coming in on that. And there's a hand, and the video's appeared from Inar Russell. And then we'll go back to, I've got a few questions lined up. We'll go back to them in a moment. But yeah, Inar, we'd like to hear from you first. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry for this. So my question is actually, when you think about it, that houses nowadays here in the UK get grants for insulating their property for energy efficiency. So why not turn around and actually reward people who just say, no, give away their car park for cycling paths? So if you go from one district to another district in a city or urban area, and rewards the citizens or the homeowners for giving away a car park and open up cycling lanes. So at that moment, you open up infrastructure there for cycle lanes, don't you?
Thank you. Yeah, would anyone, so it sounds like a great idea. Would anyone like to comment on that on the panel before we go back to some questions? I mean, we've got lots of different international contexts here, so I'm wondering how different approaches might work in those contexts.
I can just briefly say that I think the national guideline, something nationally has to be done in general. I think without that, it's very, very hard. And you can see that in the Netherlands. I mean, the Netherlands is like the cycling country. And what you do is you have like national guidelines, you have like a national approach to cycling. And I think that's what is very much needed. And I just briefly want to go back to the previous comment, because even in a city like Copenhagen is the cycling city. They do not take away parking spaces or space for cars on a political level. Do that, but they do it in secret. They don't do it openly, which shows that even in a country like Denmark with no car industry, with a very strong cycling culture, it's so hard to dig into decreasing car use. I mean, increasing cycling, fine, but decreasing car use is always a very hot potato.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Hot potato is a good way of putting it. So I'm going to move on to, there's a couple of questions for Romana and then there's some for Johannes as well. So I'm just going to just keep things moving. I'm going to paraphrase two questions in one for Romana, which is John Parkin makes the point that your findings are very stark and really show that there's a lot of concern about safety. And his question really is, how could anyone consider the area to be safe to cycle in? So I'm sure he's been a bit provocative with that question, but it's a serious concern, isn't it? And the other from Simon Cook from the panel was about I've lost it in the chat window. It was about getting bikes repaired. Are there issues with getting access to bikes and repairing bikes? Simon, I've just massacred your question. Sorry, do you want to clarify? Was that okay?
Yeah, I think it was just a question of if cycling is emerging here and it's still outside of transport regimes, have there been these other wider services such as bike shops, repair shops available for people to be able to take up cycling, or has that been an issue in sort of getting people into cycling as well?
Brilliant, thank you for clarifying that. So Romana.
Okay, thank you for the question. So I'll go with Simon first. So you might be surprised to know that actually Bangladesh is a leading manufacturer and it exports cycle to Europe. So getting a cycle probably would not be a problem because there are different range of cycle based on pricing and everything. But I think what the cyclist in this survey mentioned, that the storage facility is one of the problems, that there are no safe storage facilities and they have the fear that someone will steal their bicycle. And of course, it's an emerging regime in Dhaka, and that's an urban perspective. But in rural areas, actually, cycling is one of the main modes for people with lower income. And in rural areas, also female cyclists are not rare to see. You will see a schoolgirl going to school and then riding their bicycle. But in Dhaka, in perspective of Dhaka, it's different. And that's why we did this research. And about the safety in Dhaka, of course, Dhaka is not safe for cyclists. Hence, they're making this group ride, because some cyclists say that there is also dehumanizing attitudes from other modes. So if they see a single cyclist, maybe the bus drivers or the car drivers will push them to the side of the roads and they will talk badly, they will bully them. But if they're riding in a group, probably they can protect themselves and then they feel much safer when they're riding in a group rather than alone. So it's not safe, but the question was actually if cycling is safe and environmental friendly. So due to the nature of the question, we couldn't differentiate whether the respondents are saying that it is environmentally friendly or safe. But yeah, despite of this kind of lack of infrastructure and lack of safety, cyclists are still motivated and they're still perceiving to cycle. And that's the thing that the policymakers should focus on, I think. And recently we are having a metro rail going on. They are constructing new metro rails, so maybe cycling can act as a feeder to these modes. And yeah, so I think I have answered the question accordingly. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. We've got about 10 minutes left. I probably won't be able to get to all the questions, but so I'm going to pick a kind of selection with my own logic. This one, Johannes, there's a very specific question for you about the practicality of switching to cycle journeys. Really, what are the average trip lengths, and how possible is it that many journeys could be switched to bike in the area you're working?
Yeah, many thanks for that question. So we have data for Germany as a whole, and the average distance of local car journeys is about 40 kilometers. I think this might be the same in the Allgäu region too. And in our survey, there was 24% of our respondents reported that they bike 10 to 25 kilometers each day, and 20% of them reported that they bike between 5 and 10 kilometers per day. So and I think 10 to 25 kilometers per day is rather much. It's a large distance given the bad circumstances here. So yes, I think that there would be substantially more cycling if the infrastructure would be better. Yeah, so I think yes, that would be the case.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And besides, the Allgäu is very popular with tourists. So improving cycling infrastructure is some kind of no regret measurement. So I think it would pay off the one way or the other. Yes.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, thank you. Okay, there's a question from Esther for Simon, but another issue that cuts across all our research. I think, Esther, would you like to read your question?
Hi.
Hi.
Perfect. Can you hear me well?
Yes, that's great.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I noticed that Simon highlights the importance of embodiment and emotions for this kind of research. And I was wondering, also aligned with the fact that he found much more people interested in participating in his research as he had, forecasted. So that's wonderful, but in a way it makes me think that these people might be impacted by trauma, both physical and psychological. And I don't know, for example, things like the ethics approval for this kind of research. But in any case, how would you go about integrating this trauma-informed approach? And if you found already some hints of people being sensitive to that or needing specific approaches for participating in this research and for being taken into account that they might be impacted by trauma.
Thanks, Esther. A brilliant question. I can't tell you how much I thought and really had to strain about this with doing the ethics for this project with these aspects. Particularly, as a human geographer, we're not trained to sort of deal and support or sort of really explore trauma in that much. So it's definitely been an aspect which we have been able to address and look at, but I heavily had to consider how to go about doing that. Just coming from the pilot, there is both definitely physical and sort of psychological trauma, which people have discussed. Quite a few people have either PTSD or specific phobias or things like that emerging as a result of the collisions. But there's also, in sort of recounting their stories back to cycling, or sort of since the aftermaths, the afterlives of the collision, it became clear there's this whole series of almost re-traumatizations where, as they're going through health processes, as they're going through perhaps legal processes, and they're being asked to recount, or to tell us what happened, and pushing bodies to new limits in the hope of recovery, or even trying to get back on the bike, and those psychological aspects of being back in the same space where the collision happened. It all became the trauma of the collision wasn't sort of bounded in time and space. It's something that definitely spread out and sort of reoccurred. And one of the participants spoke this really sort of quite a visual way of talking about it, is it's not a linear track back, that the trauma can keep you looping snakes and ladders style, where you think you're progressing, then suddenly can be taken back. So it's definitely a part that's a huge element of it. I'm really still figuring out how I want to deal with that as sensitively as I can in writing up and analysing it. And I work in a faculty of health, so I've got quite a lot of more specialists in that area. So I'm going to be drawing on colleagues. That is my doorbell, apologies. Drawing on colleagues for support with that, but just in terms of getting it through ethics, there was a lot of understanding of the role of sensitive research, how something like a research event could be a re-traumatizing event itself, of being asking people to explore this, but equally how it could be therapeutic. And luckily that's how they all ended up. I was very clear it wasn't therapy. I'm not trained in that at all, not that sort of doctor, but yeah, the fact that actually having the space and time to share these stories and talk about stuff which perhaps other people no longer sort of perhaps bored of listening to, that they found very, very useful. And for both of us, it was, doing this research has helped me process some of my trauma as well. And I think having that shared experience and being willing to share some of me and them share themselves was quite useful in this. But yeah, it's a big element I'm still really tackling with.
Thank you,
Simon. Yeah. Just to add, I find it really interesting, and just also to notice that this is not the only theme or subject that at least I have worked in other research that has also kind of featured trauma in some way, to my surprise. And for example, in my case, is the impact of cycle training in adults. So there must be some past trauma linked to that. And I think this is something that we might need to start creating these teams with other colleagues who can help us really tackle these issues, because I think they are really important, and they play a role in the research as well. So thanks for that, Simon. Looking forward to see what comes out of your research.
Thank you, Esther, and thanks, Simon. We're getting towards the end. I can see Luke made a comment following Johannes' answer about e-bikes, which I can see you've answered that, Johannes, that 9% of your respondents use e-bikes. I guess that's quite practical for some of those longer journeys, certainly in terms of including more people. So in summing up, I'd like to give each of the panelists just a minute or so, just to kind of some concluding thoughts. And I'd like to base that around, apologies if we haven't got to your question, but the chat is there, and we're in the conference for 2 days, so hopefully we can get to the issues you're raising. I'd like to use a question which is from N.R. Russell, if you're able to. Actually, we're tight on time, so I'll just read it out. But the question is, do you see the car having a future in inner cities or urban areas? Or actually, what he said is, do you still see the car as having a future in inner cities or urban areas? So I wanted to pose that question as a way of kind of summing up. So who would like to tackle that first? From the panel, that is.
Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Do you see the car to have a future in inner city and urban areas?
I would like to answer it that way, because I don't see car, as an enemy, but we can actually, it can be part of a mixed mode, but not a dominant one, but we can share this mode overall in this. I would not like to say that car is not important and we don't need cars, but we just not only need cars, we also need bicycles, we also need walking accessibility, we also need different types of micromobility. So maybe sharing the road together and giving priorities to all can make this urban area or this place more lively, and all the modes will be happy. Unlike in Bangladesh, what I already said, that some people think that some modes think that they're superior than others. We have to break this type of stereotypes, I think.
Yeah, thank you. If I go to Till next, does the car have a future in the city and urban areas? And if so, will it always be a power struggle, I guess?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think yes. And I think it has to do with the fact that the car's here and the car's here to stay. Not in the sense that we will drive with diesel or gasoline or stuff like that, but then the electric car. However, I think that we need to change the planning, because as of now, in Sweden, but also in Denmark and in Germany, those are the countries I know best. The planning is always focused around the car, even though it's not explicitly said so. It's not like, oh yeah, we promote the car. But for example, in Sweden, we have lots of policy documents like for mobility, sustainable mobility, cycling, improving cycling and stuff like that. Why don't we have a plan for cars? No, because they are always there and they are like taken for granted. Yes, we need a street. The street must be this big because they're cars, period. So I think what is needed, and I agree with you, Romana, that we need to share, we need to change the view of how we use street space. And we need to think about streets, not roads, but especially in areas where you have limited public transport, rural areas, then of course we need the car. But I think the car could also function as part of the public transport system. When we have a system that there are, for example, self-driving electric cars in the city that you can call. You don't own your car anymore. I think this is like the only way of doing auto mobility in the future, if we want to change anything. To have like self-driving electric cars that you can call, but you don't own your own car. I mean, if we just do it as we used to with the privately owned cars, then electric self-driving cars won't do anything. I mean,
okay.
You know.
Yes, thanks. So yeah, so there may be cars, but it may be quite different. We may have quite a different relationship with them.
Yeah.
Just moving on because of time, but just want to give Sian, Johannes, and Simon a chance to reflect on this.
Oh, well, yeah, I think we cannot make cars disappear from cities. There are still people with limited mobility and so on who just need cars. But the idea, indeed, I think that that power of cars that is investigating that the power must change and that must turn around. That power is more given to bicyclists, certainly in inner city areas. So I think there are more and more cities here in Flanders where they make plans where cars are limited to how they access a city, and they are more like moving around the city, and when you need to go in, you go in at one specific place, but you're limited in how you get to every point. So I think these are like first steps to change that that strong impact of cars in cities.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So still there, but fewer and contained. So Johannes or Simon, who would like to go next?
Yes, thanks a lot. I very much enjoyed the discussion with you, and there are some really important insights for my own research, and I think I will look deeper into planning cultures and into the question of a redistribution of planning and power. Yes, I think that's the biggest issue. So it's not so much the question of cyclists' awareness or something like that, but it's really about right to the city and the political will. And well, that's a learning for me. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. And Simon, any final comments?
I think I'll keep it quite short because there's been a lot of wonderful ideas expressed already. Personally, and perhaps unsurprisingly, I hope they don't have a role, but I think with more rational head on, especially living in Birmingham, which is still hugely car centric. I can't see them going anywhere. And obviously for some people they offer vital services, but yeah, sometimes it's hard to separate the emotion from the rational.
Yeah, good point. So we'll wrap it up there then. We're slightly over time, but thanks very much to our panelists for those really joining that discussion, really interesting answers, and making a proper discussion, which is what we wanted. And thanks to everyone for inputting questions and perspectives on the chat window. So if I think I haven't managed to cover all of them, but hopefully there'll be a chance over the rest of the conference to discuss those things. So thanks everyone. Thanks again. Luke, I don't know, are you able to put the slide up, please, for the PowerPoint slide, which has got the schedule on? Thank you. Oh, brilliant. Very good. Brilliant. So hopefully everyone can see that. So the next session is at 11:30, which is looking at cycling during and after COVID-19, and will be chaired by Esther. And I'm sure you already have it already, but here's the link to the page with the Zoom link for each session. There's a different link for each session. So thanks again. Thanks very much to the panel, and I hope to see you all in about half an hour.